Okay, so that's 7:30. I think we'll make a start. So I'm James. I know many of you. I'm going to be chairing this tonight. Tonight we've got Andy Brown and Phil Thornton doing a bit of a double act on the subject of St Peter's Graveyard and the project they've been doing there. So Andy and Phil are going to be speaking for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes in total. I'd ask you to hold any questions you've got until they're finished, and then we'll take all the questions. And I would ask that if you do want to ask a question, if you could either raise a virtual hand on your Zoom, or if you can't work out that, give us a real hand. And David, if you can help me to spot hands, because sometimes it's a bit difficult with the number of people we've got on the screen. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Andy. So take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I don't know how much about the project.
Can I ask people to mute until we go to questions, because we're getting a bit of feedback from somebody, which is making it difficult to hear what Andy's saying. So if we maybe all mute.
I think I've got that now. The one that was causing it, I've muted. I'll check. I'll get the others now. So off you go.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I don't know how much about the project that you know, but we decided some time ago to carry out a condition survey of all the gravestones and monuments in the churchyard at St Peter's at Heysham. Obviously, due to the pandemic, that was put on hold for a while, but we eventually got round to it this year, and we started in September of this year, and we've just completed the first phase. So what I'd like to do this evening is I will go through the progress update from the project, and then Phil will take over from me, and he will talk you through the website that we've got for the project, if that's okay. We're more than happy to answer any questions at the end if you keep them till the end. So yeah, so we can share screen, David.
Yeah, I think I've got that.
Oh, all right, Phil.
Can everybody see that?
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so there we are. That's self-explanatory. It's the title of the project with some pretty nice pictures to go with it. Next. Okay, the survey started on September the 20th of this year, and our initial plan was to start with the lower end of the graveyard, one nearest the sea, which is section A, which I'll show you on a map. Next. Okay, that's the section where we started. It looks fairly straightforward, but I assure you it wasn't. There are far more graves than are indicated there. In fact, there are 289 all told, and the graveyard isn't a rectangle, because it was more of a strange shape that we'll see later on when Phil talks about the website. This is because the sea wall was washed away in a storm some years ago. And unfortunately, some of the graves went with it. So they've rebuilt the seawall, and what we're left with what we actually got now, which is not a complete graveyard, I don't think. Next. Okay, well, for the project, we decided our own criteria, how we would record it, and what would be best for us. So we have a recording form, and we start with the type of monument. There are numerous types. There's curved headstones, crosses, scrolls, tables, ledgers, all sorts. So we make a note of what type of monument or memorial it is. We also use GPS coordinates using one of our handheld GPSs. This gives us a reference that we are plotting on a map. So you can tap in the map, and you can tap in a name, and you'll get an exact location of where in the graveyard it is. really, really good and really effective. And then we do simple things like measuring it, the height, the width, the depth, what the material is made of, what material it's made of, rather. The majority seem to be granite, although there are a few sandstone and some marble, but granite by far seems to be the predominant material. Then we have a look at the inscription, and as you'll see a bit later on from the photographs that Phil will show you, the quality of the inscription varies greatly. Some of them you can read off no problem at all. We just copy them down onto the recording sheet. That's it. Others you really have to look at hard to try and read what it says. It sometimes helps if you squirt them with some water. That sometimes brings up the inscription, and then we take some photographs of this gravestone or the monument. Now using the super duper Canon camera that was very kindly donated by Lancaster Civic Vision, and believe me, it's had some use. It really has. It's been well used. Next. Okay, this basically is just what I've explained to you. The top left is Phil using the GPS. Then at the bottom we've got people bottom left we've got people measuring. Top right we've got somebody recording, and bottom left we've got Phil in action with the new camera. And in the center we have the recording sheet that we're using. Some of you will be no doubt familiar with it because you'll have filled in several. Okay, thanks, Phil. Next. Once we have all the recorded sheets, then I bring them home and I scan them into my computer. Then as a PDF, I send them to Phil, who then uploads them onto a dedicated website purely for the LDHG St. Peter's project. And Phil will talk to you a bit more about that in a short while. Next. Okay, as I said, the website's accessible to anybody who wants to have a look, and Phil can give you the link when he does his little bit. But just to be aware that it's an ongoing project, and we are updating and adapting as we go along. Next. For this phase of the project, we made a decision that we would use only volunteers from LDHG. And as such, we had a team of basically 12. It was a deliberate plan because we wanted to train for members up, first of all, who would then, come the spring when we restart with community volunteers from Heysham and the area, we would have people who could act as mentors and pass on their knowledge to these volunteers. So it was purely an LDHG project for this first phase. Next. And we've got some of the volunteers in action. The reason some of them are wearing hard hats is because the back row of gravestones is virtually under an overhang that tends to slide quite a bit, and we really didn't want rocks falling down on people while they're measuring gravestones. Hence the hard hats, all to do with health and safety. Next. Okay, phase one came to an end on the 19th of October this year, 2022. And as I said, in 11 sessions, roughly 2 hours a session, we actually recorded 289 graves that were surveyed, recorded, and nearly all loaded onto the website. I've got a batch I've got to send to Phil. in essence, we did that whole section in what virtually is a day, in less than a 24-hour period, which really does represent a phenomenal amount of work, and it showed a great deal of commitment from those volunteers that we've had. Next. So come the spring, when the nice weather starts, we're going to go back, and we're going to start on the new section of the graveyard, but this time we're going to have we're going to invite volunteers from Heysham and the community. So next. All right, this again is quite misleading. It's a section just behind the section we've completed, and from that you would think that there's not many graves there, but believe me, it's nearly full. There are several more rows of graves in there. There must be 200 graves in that section, if any. But the one benefit of this section is they're all in relatively nice straight rows, and they're relatively accurately numbered, so we won't have to start messing about trying to organize where the rows are and what number graves they are. So that should be a lot easier. Next. So what we're going to do in the meantime, because it's a long time between now and spring, but for now, what we're going to do is we're going to make a start on writing up the final report. We can start including bits like photographs and some of the statistics. We're going to continue to develop the website. We've got loads of things we can add to it, videos, more photographs. And we want to do some family history, because there are at least 20 graves in there that have some historic or local interest. This has been pointed out by the church warden. And we also want to start looking at creating a self-guided trail around the church and the graveyard using an app on a phone, which you can download as like a PDF, or if you've not got a smartphone, we'll have a paper copy available for you. That's an interesting part of the project that we look forward to getting going. Next. Well, one of the most interesting things we're going to do is we're going to research some of those who are commemorated in the graveyard, who died in conflict. They're commemorated, but they're not necessarily interred, particularly those First World War ones. There's some are commemorated on the Menin Gate. There's one or two at Suvla Bay from the Gallipoli campaign. So we're going to have a look and do some research on those, which is a nice, poignant bit of research for us to do. Next. Well, really, that's it as far as the project's concerned. We're very, very grateful to a lot of people who've supported us, particularly at times when it looked like we were going round in circles and we weren't getting very far forward at all. And there are some names up there that you can see: St. Peter's Church, Parochial Church Council, and obviously the Archdeacon, who gave his permission and his blessing for us to carry out. Yourselves at Lancaster Civic Vision for the donation of the camera, really, really much appreciated. St. Peter's Church Cafe, basically, who've kept us all supplied with hot drinks, really great. And then we got sponsorships there from Morecambe Bay, from the Old Pier Bookshop, Westgate Tires. We've had the loan of GPS from Morecambe Bay Partnership, and Graham and Richard are the church warden and one of the guides from St. Peter's themselves. They've been unstinting in their support for the project. Just to let you know that by the end of it, we will have recorded approximately 1,100 graves. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Phil, who's going to talk you through some technology that I don't understand, but he'll explain it. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Cheers,
well, if you can hear me then, I'll just change over from sharing PowerPoint to sharing a web page. So just give me 2 minutes to sort this out. Has that all come through now? Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's coming through fine, Phil.
Right, okay.
Yeah, got it.
Thank you. Right, so this is the website. It's if you just type into the browser ldhgstpeters.org.uk, it should come up. It's you've got at the top you have a navigation bar basically, and on the front page there's we've just got a bit of a slideshow on the front just to give it a bit of animation, make it look a bit more interesting than just a static page. And on the front page, what we'll have is we have an approach and methodology which Andy's been talking about. There's a couple of links on there to some publications that we've used for guidance. One of them is from English Heritage, I think, and then we'll have a précis down here, which is a summary of the report, and the detail report Andy was talking about will be through this hyperlink here, which will just click down a PDF. So, and at the top, you can just click on here. It gives you a way to navigate to and from that bit. So along the top, what we're going to do is, if I just look at maps, for example, the maps that Andy was talking about are these. You can see we've got the north and south part. This is the north part, and this is the section area that we've been working on. Now, it so happens that these it so happens these graves these graves come in at about 1900 onwards. That's why you'll find that most of the graves we've done so far are between 1900 and 2000. So that's what they're like. And if you look at Google Earth, you'll find that there's a link onto Google Earth. You see the shape of the graveyard itself is nothing like the idealized rectangle that you've got there. So when you're trying to find a grave that's based on a row and a number of graves in a particular row, it's notoriously difficult to actually find the graves. It is quite a challenge sometimes, and that's where we are with that. So we've got some maps. We're tending to do some photogrammetry work as well. So if you look at photogrammetry, it's like we'll be using the camera for this sort of stuff. Where we find some interesting gravestones. What we'll be doing is taking some photographs of it and producing a 3D model, which when this loads, I'll show you what it takes. It'll take just a few seconds to load, hopefully. And what you can do with the camera that you've donated for is we'll be able to do some photographs that allows us to do 3D models of certain things with this type of thing. Takes quite a lot of work to do it, because it's a lot of computing power, and it's just all I do on here is host a link to it. So we'll be doing photogrammetry of gravestones and monuments, and one of the monuments that's in St. Peter's that's quite a famous one is this Hogsback stone, which you may have seen when you've been down. If anybody's visited St. Peter's, you will have seen it, hopefully. It's a Saxon stone, which if I just wait till it comes up, it should come up. Okay. Right, here it is. So you can click on this and you can look at the stone and view it from all sorts of different angles. So this is one of the uses that we'll be using the camera for, which is quite useful. And the other thing we've got on here is videos. So again, we've got a video on here that's uploaded to YouTube, and there's a link to it on this website. And it's an initial video. We took it with the camera that was donated on the video mode, and it's just an introduction to the project. So if you've got time, you can go and have a look at that. I don't tend to play it now. You can look at in your own time. So if I go back now to the main list of what we're talking about here, which is gravestones. Well, the gravestones we've surveyed at the moment, what we're trying to do, we haven't got a database underlying this website. It's just a basic list of HTML files, basically. So what I've got is is lists. So because we haven't done any the old part of the graveyard, we haven't got any pre-18th century gravestones yet in the list. Most of the gravestones are in this list, which is the 20th century ones, which goes from 1901 to 2000. So there's quite a big list of those that we've done so far, and I'll just go through a few of them, just so you've got some idea of the sort of thing that we've been doing. So if you look at one of them to start off, look at Henry Blakeow.
Can I butt in, please? You
Yes.
tend to drop your voice. We can't hear the end of the sentences.
Or if I just speak a little slower, is that better?
Yeah, but you also, as you get to the end of the sentence, you tend to drop your voice, and
Right.
you hear
Okay.
yeah, a little slower and perhaps a little louder.
Right. Okay. I'll stand a bit close. I'll be a bit close to the microphone then. Right. This is an example of a grave that's in excellent condition, and also the photographs are very good. So if I click on it, I can click on the photograph. You can see that the gravestone itself is in very good condition, because it's a new one basically. The original grave of Henry Blakeow in 1919. I think when the grandchildren were interred, they put a new gravestone on. So it's just an example of what we'd like to do. All our gravestone photos we'd like to be as good as this one. And you'll find there's a standard layout of the page where we have the inscription underneath, and we have a condition survey that Andy talked about. So for this one, here's the PDF that's been downloaded. So hopefully you can see that. And it's got the stuff that Andy talked about. We've got the GPS, dimensions, the type of memorial, what it's made of, whether the inscription's legible or not, and if there's any sort of surface dirt growth. That's all recorded on the form, which will be used later on when we produce the final report. Right. So if I go back and look at another one, Anne Abbott, for example, that's an example of a gravestone that's actually in good condition. This is an example of a gravestone that is actually quite difficult to identify. Because there's not very much left of it. So when we go to the condition survey, you'll find that, you know, it wasn't possible to write a lot about this gravestone. People could just see that there was Abbott on there, and that was it. It was very difficult to see. We can work out what the inscription is from the church record, so we do know what the inscription is, but it's very difficult to actually see that from the grave itself. And if you want to look at the location, you click on the location. As Andy was saying, what should come up when you click on that link is a link through to a Google Maps page, which shows you exactly where the grave is. Which, if I just zoom in, and if I put on a map, you can see when it comes up. If we zoom in, you can see exactly where the grave is. It's easier to find that using this technique than it is using a row and grave number. It tends to be a little bit easier to do that. So that's one of those graves. If I go back again, let's look at George Briggs Clark this time. So George Briggs Clark, that chap here. This is an example of a grave that's actually quite difficult to read. If I click on that, you'll see that a lot of the inscriptions are missing. So when you zoom in on these, you can see that you can make out the name of the person, because there's holes in the marble where the incised lead lettering used to be stuck in. So you can see, you can make things out, but it is actually quite challenging to work out what it says. I think it says down here, like you've got year down here in the bottom right, which is actually quite difficult to see. Right. So George Hutchinson's another one that's worth a look at. This particular one, where we've got lots of photographs to take, we'll be doing it like this. So we have one main photograph and we'll have some smaller photographs on the side. So if there's something of interest on the side to look at, or if there's some damage we want to look at, some crack or something we want to draw attention to, we can put extra photographs on the website. But the layout's basically the same, where you've got the photo at the top, inscription, the condition survey, location, and the inscription. So that's where they are. Yeah, and William Britton's an interesting one. So if you come into this particular chap, this one here, it's got a commemorative war. It's a war commemoration on it, so very difficult to see again. Sometimes it's a marble gravestone with lead, raised lead lettering, which is actually quite difficult to see. But there's a World War I commemoration on here for a chap who died at Silver Bay in the Gallipoli campaign. So when we've got that sort of thing, we've tended to put on, or we're putting on, a link to the Commonwealth War Graves records. If you click on that, it should take you to the Commonwealth War Graves page, which talks about Arthur John Allen Britton, who's the chap who's buried there. It gives a little bit more information about him down here. There's additional information. So that's all useful if you've got people, family history people, want to know a little bit more about their relatives. It can be there to find information, more information out about them. There's a guy called Yardley, might be worth a look at, the guy at the bottom. Again, this is another one which is just extremely difficult to read, because this is just an incised lettering. So when you look at it, it's not inlaid with marble, it's just cut, and you find that it gets lichen on it, and it gets very, very difficult to read, because it's not like it's lead incised on it or anything. It's just cut into the stone itself. When the stone starts to weather, it's actually very difficult to read. So again, that's another example of a difficult to read gravestone. And I've got one more up here to show you on here. Balm, it's just a moment. Clara Balm. Yeah, this is an example of why we need a decent camera. When we first started, we did a few with mobile phone photographs, and as you can see, it's not very good there. And particularly when we did the surveys, if I click on it, you'll find that when we did the surveys in the evening, towards the evening, we found that the sun's in the wrong place to take the photograph. So obviously this looks dreadful, and you can't use I can't use this one on the website long term. It's there as a placeholder. What I intend to do is go back and take a better photograph in slow time with this earlier in the morning when the sun's behind us, and I'll get some better photographs. It's like the very first one I showed you. That was an ideal photograph. We want them all like that. So if you look on gravestones, and I've got a set of lists that do the gravestones in date order, and then I've got a bottom here just on war memorials. So I'll just click through a couple of these quickly for you. Joshua Milne, the Singleton, is a standard Commonwealth War grave, standard style. That's a Commonwealth War grave, and there's an inscription, and we've got a Commonwealth War grave record on that as well. If we go and look at S.B. Clark, now what we'll do with these, that's another chap there. Like when we're going to do some family history stuff, if we find something about him, we'll put something about them at the bottom in a little life story. So just an example of a bit of research we've done on this chap. And we've put the details down on here. And then finally, the last one I want to show you is Torkington. This is a lady who died in 1926, but she's got two sons on here. One died in the First World War and one died in the Second World War, which is quite tragic, really. But they're commemorated on here, but they're also buried. They're not buried here, they're commemorated here. They're buried out in France and Gallipoli. So basically, that's the scroll through the website. You can see that's how we've built it up. It's a work in progress, and we'll be adding to it as we go along. So I think if I just, I can leave sharing on and just open the floor to questions now, I think, if Andy wants to come back on.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Phil.
I think it would be easier, Andy, if you could close down the sharing, because we won't be able to see who wants to ask questions otherwise.
That better?
That's great. So thank you both, Andy and Phil, for an absolutely fascinating presentation of the work that you've been doing. So questions, who wants to start?
Roger's got a hand up there.
Yeah, on you go, Roger.
He's been waiting since this time yesterday evening because he came into the meeting then at 7:30 last night.
Evening, Roger.
Got the wrong day. Yes. One of the ways of helping to read the inscriptions is to use baby powder. I know it's more expensive than water, which comes out of the sky on a regular basis around here, but actually baby powder is quite a good way of reading the indentations.
Yeah, that was actually suggested to us, but we thought that it might not be a good look having loads of baby powder blowing around the graveyard. So we decided to settle on the water.
It washes off, Andy. With the dates, that Blake Howe.
Yeah.
On your form, you have his dates, 1874 to 1919, but the date of the memorial you have as 1919, but it's actually 2018, isn't it? Which do you decide? Because you've got lots of dates.
We start by recording the earliest dates. If there's more than one person, they will get a separate entry.
Right. But the grave is marked from the date of the death of the last person rather than the first person.
The first person.
First person. Right. Okay. And the other thing is, how can you show that Heysham was a maritime nation?
Interesting point.
Have you got any
we
answers?
can actually, we will, I'll make a note of that, because we can include that as a link on the trail that we do around the church and graveyard. We can point out those gravestones with a maritime history, because there's one there. It's one of Louise Brining's relatives, who was the berthing master at the New Harbour. So we can include things like that. Well, that's a good point. Thanks, Roger.
The Morecambe Parish churchyard is absolutely stuffed with anchors.
Yeah.
That's my question.
Thank you.
Okay. Next question. Who wants to go next?
Oh.
To get there.
Liz, I think, is it?
Liz or Howard? And you're on mute, Liz.
Howard's put you on mute, Liz. Howard usually does hand signals at this point.
Or hold up bits of paper with a question on it.
Well, you're not on mute now, Liz. It's showing here that so there's something wrong with your
no sound
microphone.
I'm going to take another question whilst we see if you can sort out your sound. Any more questions? Well, I've got a couple, and that I'd like to. The first one's a fairly basic one, and that is, of all the graveyards within Lancaster District, why did you select St. Peter's?
Well, basically because St. Peter's aren't, because it's history.
Right.
It's a fantastically old graveyard, and secondly, a lot of the others are being surveyed to some extent under this new scheme that's being carried out by Church of England and
Right.
some lottery funded, whereas St. Peter's are not doing it.
I'm just curious as to why you'd
So,
settled
yeah.
on that.
And also really because of our group's relationship with basically the church warden and the tour guides, because they've done a lot of tours and talks for us. So it was a bit of a no-brainer, really.
Right. Okay. That's helpful. And the second question I had was, I mean, the website that Phil and others have put together, I just think is great. Just it's so interactive. It's got lots of information on it. But the question I've got is that I'm vaguely aware there are some national websites about graves that you can search. And I'm just wondering whether you get any plans to link the work you've done to some of the national sites.
Well, Phil,
have we? At the moment, I mean, the website we've got at the moment is, there's one that's like Find a Grave. There's various other sites, and they tend to have quite a large database.
Yeah.
So this job's not been about an IT project. It's been
Right.
an architecture project. So I've tried to keep the website to the simple as possible. So if I was looking at trying to integrate with something bigger, then we'd need to use a database type system that then you could incorporate the database into a wider one. And that's a bit bigger issue. So
The other thought that occurs to me, I'm looking to David now, that once you've got the website fully operational, yeah. I mean, I think what would be quite good, David, is if we could actually give a bit of publicity through our social media footprint. Because there must be lots of people who have got relatives buried there, or know people there. And it's great having these things, but it's important that people know it's there so they can take advantage of it. So, but I think that's something we would be very happy to do for you in the future. I'm going to go back to Howard and Liz. Have you any joy in your sound, Liz, Howard?
no, I can't hear you, Liz.
Right. Well, can I make a suggestion? Do you want to put your question in the chat box? If you go to the chat box and type your question in, and whilst you're doing that, I'm going to take David and/or Pam. I'm not quite sure who it is. And again, David and Pam, you're on mute and you're off mute.
Well, hi. It's just a very simple question, really. I was just wondering, have you found out yet how old is the oldest grave that is likely to have an identifiable date on it?
There was one in the 1700s. That's the one that springs to mind immediately. There is a grave that is marked Viking remains from St. Patrick's Chapel.
Yeah.
But the 1700s would be my guess at being the earliest one.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Right. Oh, there was a message. There was a question there from
a comment rather than a question.
Comment rather than a question.
But I presume the comment's coming.
Yeah, Roger in the meantime has raised his hand as well.
Roger, George, do you want to go again while we're waiting for Liz?
Go, Roger.
Would there be I can't remember who it is, but somebody is keen to do landladies, and would there be any sort of symbolism of landladies, like cross spoons or something, that you could show that there were that the tourism industry hit Heysham in the Victorian period?
No, I'm not so sure. I don't think they mark on the graves. Here lies Doris, the greatest landlady in the northwest from Morecambe.
What we can do is, like I said, that the military graves I've got is just an example of a list of graves that are from an identifiable group. And you could do something like this, but we've just had something in the report that does that. You could have an article that says that, or you could have, and you could have a list on there, right? But the one we're looking, the one that have struck me just whilst we're working on the latter part of the graveyard was just how many graves there are from Bradford, for example. And there's a theme there, whereas a load of Bradford mill owners used to come to Morecambe, and they used to set up holiday resorts for their workers, and they'd bring them in on the trains or buses, trains up through Carnforth, through Bentham, the railway line that comes from Bradford. And you'd be surprised just how many there are in there. So there's a theme there we could have. So we could have a list of graves that are linked to that sort of theme. And like you say, if there's something about people who did the holiday industry, if there's fishing, I mean, there are people in there that have died on Heysham docks, for example. So there's quite a lot of different themes, but we're working out just how to present that on the website. We might have a section on where we could have articles that link these graves together. We haven't done anything yet about doing a trail, but we could have a trail around looking at the Bradford graves, some of the military graves, some of the more interesting local people, local dignitaries. There's a lot of Twemlow Roads people. There's some famous families up there. So there is quite a scope to do some more work. So the website's really in its infancy, and we can add stuff on. I don't want to make it into a massive IT project, but I want to make it into something that we could make it interesting for people to read. So yeah, we can do something.
So we've got Howard and Liz's comment, and I was particularly interested in finding things like Mason's marks, which I'd not come across before. I don't know, Andy or Phil.
Yeah, that's well, of course, Liz and Howard have spent many sessions recording these graves with us, and every now and again you'll find a grave with the Mason's mark or the Mason's name on it. Actually, finding them can be really a matter of luck rather than judgment, because they do come up in some obscure places, but they're generally found around the plinths or the bases of the monuments. And there are some. There's a lot of Morecambe Masons. Some of them, I believe, are still actually in going now. And there's one or two from Lancaster. Yeah, but it is quite an interesting bit of a discovery. I'll just point out one thing when it comes to actually recording the inscriptions. We're not permitted to clean the gravestones, particularly if they have lichen or mosses on them, because of ecological damage. We're very aware that there is an ecological habitat there, and we don't want to be disturbing it. So if we have a policy, if we can't record, if we can't see it, we can't record it, we don't start scrubbing it with pan scourers and what have you to find it. It's just not worth it, and it's not fair, really.
That's interesting, Andy, because I thought you were going to say it was because of potential damage to the surface of the gravestones.
Well, it would cause damage, yeah. We would, because particularly with some of the older ones, some of them are actually quite fragile. There's been a bit of delamination on some of them where the weather has actually started to split. So we don't want to be cleaning them off and making them worse. And of course, there's the ecological side as well. So
interesting. Amy, you've been waiting for a bit to get in.
Hi, sorry. And apologies, I was late. Stagecoach managed to cancel my flight. So apologies if I missed this, but the answer a few minutes ago about the oldest grave being from the 1700s to 18th century got me thinking about whether there's any evidence of graves from either Black Africans who are in the locality, and we know that, for example, the vicar of Heysham was a known slave owner at one point, or indeed graves from, again, known slave owners that might be of interest to the great work that Lancaster Black History Project is doing. So I just wondered if there's any evidence and whether there's any potential link.
None that we've come across so far, but that being said, we've only done one section of the graveyard.
I mean, anything from that period would probably be in section E, wouldn't it, Andy?
Yeah, I think so. Which is the older section of the graveyard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not the bit we're doing next either, is it?
And also, there are probably as many graves again without headstones or monuments. So again, you're possible without sort of looking at the burial books. It's difficult to tell, but we would certainly know once we get up to the older part of the graveyard if there's anything along those lines, and we certainly would sort of let people know if we did come across anything like that.
Thanks for that, Andy. Any other questions? I don't see any hands up. Is there anything else anybody wants to ask? No, I don't see anybody. No. If there's no further questions, can I thank both Andy and Phil for a really, really interesting sort of presentation work that you've been doing. And I mean, I think that we're particularly pleased that we were able to, in some small way, assist your efforts, because I mean, it really is a really important record.
It's not been a small way, I assure you.
Yeah, it's really very impressive. So, as I say, I thank you very much. And perhaps maybe when your work's a bit more developed, you might want to come back again and sort of give us an update.
With pleasure. Be my pleasure.
Right. So, if there's nothing else, if I can thank both Andy and Phil for talking to us, and to thank all our members for linking in tonight and joining us, and we'll see you next time. David, just before I go, do you want to give a plug for the next one?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think what I'm going to do is delegate here and hand over to Jill, because Jill knows more about our next speaker, which we've got in December, and it's a physical meeting, face to face. We actually speak to each other, and we have cups of coffee and mince pies. Over to you, Jill.
So, Jill, do you want to rise to the challenge?
Well, I can do, yeah. Well, I've not arranged it. Diane's arranged it, but it is somebody that I know quite well, and he's quite an interesting speaker. He's a local farmer from South Cumbria, who has, I think he has about 150,000 hens. He had a sausage making factory and rears beef and sheep, and he's the first farmer in the Northwest that actually got his own produce into Asda in the 1990s. So he's very passionate about farming and food production. And I think the theme is the food on your plate and the future of farming in the North. And I can't remember how Diane worded it, but the future of farming in the Northwest anyway. So he's quite a character, and I guess it's quite fitting for Christmas. And there's a regionality and probably an environmental aspect to it as well, because that fits in with the Civic Society's
and I think, from memory, that's the 14th of December.
The 14th of December at the Story Institute, and the timing is 7:15 for 7:30, and I believe there's a mince pie and a drink. I can't remember what the invitation said about whether we make a donation price-wise.
Worry about that later, Jill.
But we'll worry about that later. There will be a reminder email, but I'm sure it'll be a very enjoyable evening for all, and a great opportunity to have a face-to-face chat.
So we'll be sending out more information on that. Okay, so thank you again, everyone, and join us in December if you're available. Okay, so good evening, everyone.
Thanks, Andy and Phil. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.